So a nudge have been used a lot in public scene. For example, in the organ donation, we have realized that we didn't have enough people being able to make a choice who were extremely difficult at that time. And as such, a very simple nudge was to prompt people when they were renewing their ID to ask them, would you like to be an organ donor? So the decision, the difficult decision was asked early on without changing much of the option for individual, but had led to great results where at the end of the day, more people were willing to give their organ. Another example in a day-to-day is when you go to a restaurant and in the restaurant tab, you already have the tips included. It's automatic and you don't have to think about it. This is a type of nudge that exists both in the public sphere, but also in the private sphere. And my work falls exactly into that. I am really looking at taking on a behavioral view of people strategy and helping organizations design human-centric solution informed by data. And as my colleague Colleen Chen at the University of Santa Clara mentioned, we need data. So please participate in any way you can, sharing your effort there. But there is also something that we need to be aware. There is no one size fits all, and all the data are very different. We need to act from the data as they need to empower you. So where is the innovation gap? I think we all agree that diversity and inclusion go hand to hand with innovation. The problem that we observe is so far the chance to invest into the inventor journey. Men are overall 60 times more likely to embark upon this journey compared to a female or underrepresented individual. There is a compound number of challenges related to it. A lot of them have been addressed by a colleague of mine yesterday and today. But for example, we do know that female and underrepresented inventors are less likely to be leading or co-leading a patent, that when their claims are denied, they are less likely to go back and to make an appeal overall. So we need to reverse engineer. What does it mean to reverse engineer? Reverse engineering the process of where the biases came in. So we need to look at the data. And the way in which I approach the problem when I work with a company is we look at the process, we look at the content, we look at the information, and we look at the people. We have all type of data, and this is great, but what do you do with data? Great, you have the problem, you're spotting in, but you want to know what are the solutions from it. And this is where my expertise come in. We are able to assess where the biases come in. So let me pause here for a moment. We need to consider that an individual have at least 250 bias. Imagine in a room of 10 people, each of them having 250 bias on their own. And you never know when they are kicking in, and you don't know which one will kick in first and what is happening at the group level. Thank God, the data are there to tell you and prompt you to tell you, hey, this is what is going on, either from a process or an information perspective, and this is how we can minimize those biases kicking in. From that, I design nudges, we map them, and we implement them, and we measure them. There are different ways of measuring. Some of them are about taking one business unit or one specific group of individual where we will do something, and another one we will not do anything, which is oftentimes referred as a RCT. There is before and after. There is a whole variety of ways of which we can measure the success of those nudges. Doing that, you are designing an organization who is inclusive. If I have to summarize, and I do know, and I'm very aware that this is not the full spectrum of the innovation path, but for the sake of our conversation, and I want to make sure that we are on the same path there, I divide it into 4 categories: informing and engaging, accepting and stretching, the selection process, and then filling, grant, and renewal. Under inform and engage, we're trying to bring the pool of inventor, helping them submit idea. In the accept and stretch, we're bringing individual and group all together. And in the selection, we pitching sometimes to people, to a set of reviewer or to the legal team. And that focus after it give a process of selection, keeping in mind that a lot of companies already have a certain type of portfolio in which they want to invest into their innovation path. And as such, again, there is no one size fits all. So let's move on to some work that I have done with a company related to the implementation of nudge. So I want to go over 4 types of cases with you. The first one is increasing the potential inventor pool. The second case relates to increasing the response rate participation. The third one is increasing the number of co-lead and lead and brainstorm during the brainstorming session. And the last one relates to the panel of review of inventor. The way in which I will describe the case is always the same. I will give you some background, tell you what the data told us, and then I will move on into the action that we took, the nudge that we have implemented, and what were the results. If I have to make an analogy, the way in which I'm trying to bring you with me is we have a dance party, we need to invite, we need to make sure that they are coming and that they respond to it. When they are at the dance party, we want to make sure that they're getting on the floor. And more importantly, we want to make sure that they are John Travolta on the dance floor, because otherwise they don't take the light. So the first case that I want to discuss with you is about increasing the pool of inventor. So this company is in a very competitive market, used to be, I will say, in the top 10, and now is in the top 15. They have struggled in the last 5 years to keep pace in their innovation. And that's the reason why when we discuss with the board and the CEO, that lead them to realize that we need to try something else, because otherwise we're going to lose the market of where we are and we are not competitive anymore. In the data, we have seen that technical and non-technical people were overall very eager to participate into the innovation process and wanted to be involved. But there were a lot of barriers for them to be able to come in. So we did 3 actions. We changed the messenger, we changed the system, and we changed the time of the decision. So let me dive into the messenger. Here, we have used the CEO, and more specifically, we have asked and draft an email for the CEO. As a CEO overall in every organization, compared to any other leader, inspire trust most of the time. to their people. And a lot of people who work in any type of organization are oftentimes very inspired by their CEO. So there is this attraction coming in. So the CEO was selected to give the message. We went on a top-down approach. But what we did in the email is we act on 2 points. The first one is we focus on the fact that the CEO mentioned that his people were his asset, and his asset is innovation. And without them and their support, they could not be successful. The second point that we made is the CEO is asking people 40 hours. And if you think about it, we're working roughly 2,000 hours a year. So it's less than 2% of your time to participate into the innovation process. And the third thing that we did in this email is reinforce the fact that the success belonged to them as a group. He used we and not I. The second point that we did and second action is we changed the system. We moved from an opt-in to an opt-out, meaning that everyone within the organization was now automatically involved into giving 40 hours of his time toward innovation. And if people wanted to opt out, they could. The way in which we prompt the decision was 2 weeks. Why? Because we have a peak memory. The memory of today may be different if I have to look at it next week or in a month or in 6 months. So 2 weeks were the perfect balance for making the decision that we wanted them to do with us, being involved into the innovation part. And as such, after 1 week, they receive a reminder email, and at 2 weeks closing, you can now change the option that you wanted to be part of. The result, we have an increased number of diverse applicants across all levels, technical and non-technical. And overall, an increase of 30% female applicants participating and being involved across the entire process. And afterward, as well, for diverse applicants, an increase of 24%. Well, you will tell me, Paola, this is due to luck. And I will tell you, well, maybe not. Because that situation happened again to another company. But this one, their challenge was not to involve technical and non-technical. That was having a higher response rate of their R&D innovation talent. And think about that this company already had a small number of female and underrepresented group, and engaging them was not working. So what did they try? Before coming, they try having their supervisor telling their people, you need to submit an idea, you need to take the lead there. There were a lot of pressure. And what we realized is in the data, we had an increase of the number of turnover of underrepresented individual and female in the R&D section and technical section. And the number of ideas submitted to the legal team overall decreased. So we were at the opposite of what the company wanted to achieve. So here, based on that knowledge, we implemented 3 actions again. We use a messenger, we change the language, and we use what we refer to it as a peer-to-peer system. So the messenger, which I heard some of the company were already doing, during this conference, and I'm very pleased to hear that you're already implementing those type of idea and nudges, was to take on a successful female and underrepresented individual inventor. And here is a trick. We asked them to email the potential pool with their first name, and in the email to explain why solving matter and solving complex problems matter and being part of the innovation, so their personal motivation. And the second point, the joy of being an innovator. What does it bring them at the personal level, and how that have benefit them in their personal growth. The second thing that we did was using the language, a twist in the language. We didn't ask in the email to say, oh, by the way, you have been identified. No. In the email, we change it to, you have been selected. You are part of the top 1%. And of that, on the peer-to-peer system, we use it for involving them as a reminder. By the way, 80% of your peer already responded to this invitation, this selection process. Do you want to come in? And the last twist that we did was a time before COVID. So don't know if we can still apply this one, but we had a yellow post-it on the desk of that individual, coming from a colleague, saying, I'm so happy to be working with you. You always have great idea. That simple nudge. The implementation of those 3 nudges led to an increase of the number of diverse applicants across all the geography in the technical field. Increased by 45% the number of female participating later on in the brainstorming session, and 34% for diverse applicants. Now you have inviting them, they respond, they're coming to the party, great, but you want to make sure that they're coming onto the dance floor and they're taking the lead. So in this company, the challenge they had is, again, they had a small amount of female and diverse innovator taking on the lead or co-leading patent during brainstorming session. And here again, the problem is the egg and the chicken, right? You want to make sure that you're providing role model, but if you don't have enough, you cannot attract enough women and underrepresented individual to be part of the panel and of the path of patent innovation. And the second thing is you want to make sure that they are safe during those brainstorming sessions. And psychological safety is a coin word that my colleague that I adore, Amy Edmondson, and I highly recommend you to read her book on psychological safety, where people can bring out their idea in a safe place. And this is not something that is as easy as it appears to be. So when I went on working with this company, they have tried all-female panel. They have tried mixed panel with underrepresented. They have tried a 30%, where they try to bring at least 30% of female in it. It didn't get any result. And I'm not saying this is not a solution. I'm just mentioning that because there is no one size fits all, and all of it depends always of every company background. But in that instance, the goal was really to take that into account. Those actions didn't work out. So we need to make something else happen. And in the data, something pop up. And particularly about the fact that people were not feeling necessarily as safe as the organization sought related to bring new idea. So here we did 3 nudges. We changed the team and the rule of the game. We play roulette and we drink a lot. We only drink water. Let me be clear here. So what are the first nudges? So in team and rule, we send in advance a list of 5 questions to people who were coming to the brainstorming session 1 week before the meeting. And in that, we focus on the team, the portfolio team that the organization wanted to be focusing their development. We include what was considering as non-obvious. We give them example and as well a list of vocabulary that we thought was useful for them in any way of describing idea and showing them, hey, this is a great way of presenting your idea. This is a so-so idea, but the way we present, look how great it is now. So everything was in a framing of those ideas. The second thing that we did was, rather than during the brainstorming session reviewing their idea, they were reviewed by their peer, another group who were not aware of this idea. And this is the beauty of it, because they were working on improving the idea. And what we did here is we nudged the people before going to the meeting with a simple idea. Team, stand for, together everyone achieve more. And being able to bring feedback and early feedback to your peer will improve your own idea as well. The third nudge that we implemented was drinking 1.5 liters before coming to the meeting. And you will tell me, Paola, drinking 1.5 liters? Why? Simply because our body is an engine and we need to play with it. And as such, when our bladder is full, we are more prompt to take risk into our decision. And this is what we wanted. Creating a safe place where people can bring their idea, knowing that they will receive early feedback and be willing to take risk. That has led to great results related to the number of diverse ideas who have been submitted by female and diverse applicants, but also, and more importantly, the one who takes the lead as female have increased by 15% and 13% for diverse individual taking on the lead or co-lead in brainstorming session and then along the panel, the patent funnel. The last case that I want to go with you is the panel review. Not every company have that, but this is an important one, where here the company have tried having 3 reviewers looking at whatever were coming into their plate, including having people from legal in it, people from the R&D, and so on. They also have tried the 30% rule, which was completely impractical because anyway in the pipeline, they didn't have the 30%. And overall, the data show that those reviewers, despite trying to be as fair as they can, they were giving less green light to idea presented by female and underrepresented group. So we had to act based on that knowledge and of those data. So we took 3 actions again. We changed the composition of the panel. We changed the time of the decision, and we changed the format. So in a composition, let me be transparent. We tried and it failed monumentally. 6, 5, 2, 1. We tried, it failed, no effect. The perfect balance was at 4-panel reviewer. And the trick was having someone who was not necessarily technical into that reviewer panel. The time in which their decision were looking at those idea also was changed. The data show that the decision were not the same based on the time. Something that I have seen over and over across many organizations and not only into the innovation path. So here we changed the time. Decision of reviewing those innovators were made in the morning between 9 and 11. Some of you may have been familiar with that format, as I heard some of the panelists also mentioning it. When people, the innovator were submitting their idea, we wanted to create the blindness, right? So people could not see who were those potential inventors. So the way in which we did, we work with the communication department and the graphist as well. And we asked them to create with an inventor a small video, 2 minutes. The child could understand what was invention about. And the panel will first review that video and rank it and give his opinion. And we have established a very clear metrics in which we wanted them to review those video. Then we asked them another day, again, 9/11, to read the written proposal. And here again, we shovel those ideas that were presented to them, and we asked them to rank it. And finally, they had the in-person presentation, and they rank it again. We compiled those rankings, and of those rankings, we asked the panel review to not think about who they should include into moving forward and giving the green light, but who they should exclude. And when doing the exclusion, they needed to justify why that group or that idea was not worth being pursued as part of the portfolio of the company. Doing those 3 nudges led to an increase of the number of patent idea that have been selected for female by 25%, and also by diverse applicant by 29%. So we have some lesson learned from those, I will say, case that I presented to you. The first one is invite everyone, if you can, to the innovator path by changing the choice that you present to them. Secondly, try to make sure that the invitation to the party is framed and sent at the right time. Ask focused questions ahead of time so everyone can benefit of early feedback, including of their peer. Help people make the best decision they can, including your reviewer. And that you can do so by paying attention to the time and the format of their review. And finally, try to increase as much as you can the number of reference points that you will be using to assess people. Is there any payoff for any organization to be embracing more diversity and inclusion, and as such, more innovation? Well, in my forthcoming book called Diversity Dividend, published by MIT Press, I share with the audience that diversity and inclusion is good for business. Company that I work with, and I'm sharing a lot of, while keeping all confidentiality, some of the nudges that I have implemented across the path to increase the number of female and underrepresented group. Overall, those companies exceed financial target. They are more effective, they are more innovative, they are more collaborative, and they have a better customer and client service. And I'm just giving you three easy, I will say, metrics. Employees are more satisfied with their job. They are overall more likely to stay with their employer, and there is more development opportunity for them. And today, in the war of talent, employers need to be aware that keeping their diverse and keeping them included in part of the organization, it is a win-win. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Paola. That was pretty powerful. I know there's going to be some questions. So if you want to get out of your screen sharing, maybe I can suggest everybody turn on their cameras and we can do a little more informal Q&A. If you just stop sharing your screen, there you go. So does anybody have any questions? And if so, can you raise your hand so we can give you the floor? Oh, okay, I have one from Jill. Jill, is your camera on? What's your favorite nudge? She likes the opt-out versus opt-in.
What is my favorite nudge? Oh my God. I have no favorite one. I have so many under my trick. I love all of them. You know, it depends to know what is the problem I'm trying to solve. And I'm finding in my toolbox what is the best one adapted to it. I like the one about, maybe this one is one of my favorite one, the post-it. It's a very simple one.
I know when you and I had talked earlier, you had told me that that you've identified 250, I guess, bias points. I'm not sure how I say that correctly. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how correlated are your nudges with some of these different biases?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I did not personally identify 250 biases. I will say the entire field have identified that we have roughly 250 biases that kick in at the individual and at the group level. How do I use that? Well, you know, the data are extremely powerful. I'm mainly using big data. Sometimes I'm pairing that with a qualitative interview, but there are ways in which we are predictable in the way we will react, and sometimes the way in which our decision will be prompted based on the environment in which we are surrounding ourselves. And as such, the data generally are just an outcome, right? And so you really want to make sure that the outcome you have change, but you need to reverse engineer and see what, for example, in the process or in the information or the type of people you're bringing in, or I will say the order of sequence of events lead to those biases and lead as such to those outcomes. That's where using those biases and knowing when they kick in help you design nudges that are adapted to the situation. And if I have just one thing to say here, you know, most of the time when I go to an organization, they have a wealth of knowledge about what are the problems that they have. But what they are missing is how do we solve it, right? And so it's empowering their knowledge and tapping into the power of behavioral science and big data and behavioral economic to tune in all of that and channel toward the goal that they want to achieve.
Okay, understood. Which nudge ended up having the results that were most surprising to you? Or do you, or maybe it's several nudges, but I think it's probably more than one.
Oh, well, there is many of them, not necessarily all into the innovation path. I think one that we did, and that I think that was a very fun one, was changing the color of the plate at the cafeteria. And based on where you were working, right? Which business unit you were working. And this one was really fun to watch because we did a behavioral matrix behind it. And we see that suddenly some business unit were more open to talk to others than some of them. And then we have changed those plate and the order of it. And we have magically create more interaction and collaboration across team. So this one was a very fun one. It was a 6-month project. It was fascinating.
That's cool. So can you talk about how you've set up some of the pilots or measurements within companies? And how would you, I mean, you have a lot of companies on the program here. So, you know, if they wanted to do such a pilot, how would you suggest they do so?
Well, at the offset, I should say one thing. There is no one size fits all. And if anyone tell you, I have the perfect recipe and just do that and you fix everything, my advice is run away as far as you can.
Right. We have some swampland for you, right? Go ahead.
But piloting, so depending on where you are, right? Something that I did not mention, depending on how global is the company, all type of data are not necessarily available. For example, in Europe, we have the GDPR rule applying. In other parts of the world, diversity and inclusion doesn't mean the same thing. So let's put that aside. One easy thing that you can do, depending on how your company is set up. But if you have a headquarter on the west side and another one on the east side, on the East Coast, you may think that you may intervene on the East Coast if your R&D is split off, and let the West Coast do whatever they are doing, and then you see the results. That's one way, for example. That's trying to find a control group. You may, depending on what it is, looking at a before and after. You need also to be careful while doing that, because you may be measuring things that may not be the same. But I will say the piloting is something that is extremely interesting to do. The most important is a matrix and the measurement over it, because it's easy to implement something, but if you have no result, and I have seen that, you know, people get enthusiastic. I'm about to publish a piece on that, where people are like, yeah, it's working, and look, we know it's changing. And then the data are, no, it's not working. So being sure to measure over time also is important.
And how long, I mean, do these pilots take? You had mentioned the one with the plate was 6 months. Is that kind of a common framework? Or I'm trying to get a sense of, for folks on the line here, how long before they might actually see some change?
I wish I was Santa Claus or anything similar than that. You know, everything depends on the type of the challenge that we are trying to solve. And we have implemented nudges from, I would say, a minimum of 30 days to a maximum of, some of them I'm still on it, and it's 6 years intervention, right? So it really depends on how you dial in or dial out and what you're trying to fix. But I will say what is the most important is to make sure that whatever you're doing, you have quick results and you see if it works before you go into iteration and scaling up, because otherwise you're losing people within the organization. So I will say ideally you're trying to go in and out within a 3 months period. That should be enough. And I think anyone who is doing the work that I'm doing should and will agree with me, you need to empower the company that you are with. So when you're gone, they can still function without any program and they run even more stuff. That's the most important.
Okay. So it's good to know that there's some quick wins that can be had or to try out stuff. It's not a super, necessarily a year-long process to get to the answer. There will be some win somewhat quickly. Another one is that, you've been very intentional about the words that you use, like nudge and some of the other things in the language. So how do you really nuance this language and figure out what to choose and how to use it for when you're talking with companies?
Again, the data, the organizational culture tell us more. Some company, and some sector, it's more about colleague, for example, other are more about friend at work. It is, depending on where you are, it's something that you're learning over time and you have been trained for, being able to identify which type of language will resonate more with the type of sector and the type of people that you're trying to help in their decision.
So when you're, I'm sorry, keep going.
No, because I saw that was a question from Jeremiah about using nudge. And yes, I'm extremely intentional about it, using that word, because we always leave the freedom of choice to the individual. We're just helping them, making sure that they're making the best decision that they want to do, right? They have many doors in the front of them. I will not take your hand and lead you to one door, but I will make sure that the order that I'm presenting to you lead you to the best outcome and the best self of yourself in that choice.
Okay. Another question is, any more to say about the power of defaults?
So the power of default, that's a great one. That's one of the nudge. So Cass Sunstein and Richard Tallard in their book of 2008 called Nudge, who is also reprint and just coming out. And I advise you, if you didn't read it, please go ahead. It is a really nice new version. I had the privilege to look at it. So the power of default, yes, this is one of the options, but this is not always working, especially related to female and underrepresented group in their ability to be engaged over the process. So there is a whole conversation in academia, and I'm not going to get into it, on how sometimes in practice, the implementation of the default rule has been used in a way that people are losing their choice. And the whole principle is helping people in their choice, but never removing that freedom of choice.
So that goes back to what you said earlier. You don't lead them to the one solution. You open the doors and let them still make the choice.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you've been working with companies, can you talk a little bit about, I guess maybe help me understand who's the client, like the function in the company that maybe is where you're working? Because you seem that you've worked across sort of the inventorship process. So it could be legal, it could be a business unit, it could be, the executives, because again, when you're doing a top-down initiative. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
So I will say every organization have the same will, or at least I will say agree on trying to increase diversity and inclusion. People with who I work are coming from everywhere into the organization, depending on what they want to achieve. I will say one of the key word that I have heard and that I will echo into it is the importance of having leadership being involved. and supporting any type of initiative and nudge. Because at the end of the day, when you do a pilot or when you're implementing nudges, you know, we have to be responsible that at the end of the day, there are people on the other side. And you want to make sure that whatever you are doing do not impact them negatively. And that is also aligned with the mission and the purpose of the organization. And I will not sidetrack here, but I think everyone working in data, we have seen some of the excess over it in the last few years. So making sure that everyone is fully aligned into what we are doing as a diversity pilot or a nudging pilot is extremely important. I have worked with, a whole spectrum of the organization.
So I guess when companies come to you, and I realize sometimes that what they're asking you to do may not be the real problem. So can you maybe talk about how you get to the process of really identifying the real issue that needs to be addressed?
So I'm always working in any type of conversation with a company with, I don't know anything. And they are the one who have the wealth of knowledge. But I also know one thing is I never listen to someone who will tell me, I know what I have as a disease, or I know what I have as a problem. I need to make an informed choice over that. So through the, I will say, conversation, sharing of data confidentially, I'm able to assess where the biases may have crept in very strategically. We have a very candid conversation with the people that I'm working with. And I tell them, listen, we cannot work on everything. We're going to have to make a choice. But I think on the priority, this is a top 3 priority where we need to focus our effort to align it with the quick win that will allow you to get more from the organization and achieve the goal that you want to have. I will say period of 3 months, 12 months, 2 years, you really certainly see effect and you see them amplifying over time.
Yeah, I have to imagine that as you start your first pilot and you have some success, whatever that is, that it breeds wanting to do more and look at the things that you may not have focused on initially, keep expanding out to address all these other issues. And is that what actually happens? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, and you know, one of my greatest proud is some of the company have created a behavioral science team in it who have grown to 200 people. So that's where, you know, the joy is, where, you know, they saw the benefit and being able to do that, to use it internally and not necessarily externally to their service or the product that they're offering, but really internally. So yeah,
turning it from answering a question to creating a capability to do it themselves.
Yeah, I think that's the most important, you know, being able to move forward. I'm happy to help and be there. And I'm always in relationship with all the companies that I'm working with or I had worked with, and will always be there for them. But autonomy is the most important one.
Right, exactly. So I'll turn it back to the audience. If you guys have any other questions you want to ask, either put them in the chat or unmute yourself, and you know, let's get them all answered while we can. I know I have learned a lot, Paola, mostly about, I mean, I guess I'm more horrified that there's 250 identified biases to start, but knowing that there are ways to actually re-engineer the process and nudge people to more appropriate actions with discernible results is, I think, just amazing. So I can't applaud you enough for your work, and any way that we can help or broadcast what you're doing to let companies know that there are solutions to this issue with definitive, actionable measurements is great. So again, thank you so much for taking your time to spend with us today. And I encourage all of you on the line to reach out to Paola and talk with her about any issues that your company may be experiencing. Thanks again so much.
Thank you all.